Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and more importantly than anything, besties, discuss books not as readers but as writers. Our goal is to draw inspiration from great books and to help you understand how to become a better writer through your reading and more intentional reading. And of course, we do love to have a good laugh and a giggle along the way, of which there are always plenty. So before we dive into our new book this month, which is Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geissinger, and boy do we have a lot to talk about with this book and a lot of good stuff coming down the pipeline. But before we get into all that good stuff, Dana, what's new over at Danger Tales?
Oh my God. Let's see. We are rocking and rolling on our summer challenges. You guys are going to hear more about it as we come into the episode, some of the things that we're doing. We're doing Christmas in July. But one of the biggest things that it has recently took place is we did the soft launch of my plotting program. So
yes, more details, please, immediately.
Just tease them out. No, it's called Addictive Romance Blueprint, and y'all, this is something I realized as I was sort of working on this. It's been this sort of combination of almost 20 years of thinking and writing, and it's not 20 years worth of stuff, so don't get scared, but it's just about your understanding, changing and evolving and growing. And after doing the boot camp a couple of months back, that sort of just helped me to shore up what all I wanted to be there. At first we thought it was going to be a small course, and then I was like, no, this is a program. We start off with branding, then go into understanding the 4-act structure, then go into the Addictive 8 framework, and we cover both internal and external structure. So by the time you're done, you should have a novel plotted, and even to the point of my accordion method, which is however little or how much you need to plot. Because I'm a detailed plotter, but I have some clients that they just like a one sentence or two, like a skeleton outline is good for them. And what are some of those things that you can do to take it from then being just your outline to writing? And so, we finished the soft launch, or it's a soft launch with a pre-order, and then it goes live in August. So by the time you're hearing this, we're knocking on the door of everything being live, and I'm just tired, and really, 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 really excited, nervous and excited. And so I have a lot I could say about it. But this is something, I am the queen of templates and frameworks, okay, when it comes to writing. And so to really distill this down, we had people testing it for the past almost 6 months. Many stories that have been written based upon the framework. And then for us to come back and sort of really teach just the fundamentals of the 4-act structure, along with giving that framework, has been like, so yeah, I'm excited.
Good. Well, it's been really interesting to kind of be along for the ride. Just not honestly, just kind of on the periphery, because we always talk and stuff, of this thing coming into being, because it was supposed to be a small something, and then you showed me the outline, and I was like, and you're like, this isn't a small something anymore, and I was like, that is not that. No, this is a full something. Like it is very robust, but it's cool though, because like I've watched you teach so many of these elements individually, talk about them.
Exactly.
I've heard you talk about them at conferences. I've talked to you about them. I've seen them in your courses. and it's like bringing this all together in the, like, it almost feels like the total, like, it almost feels like the total, it is the total plotting package, right? And you're covering the things that you always tell people that they need. So you go through the branding, we talk 4-act structure, we get our external stuff working, and we get our internal stuff working, because we want both of them together, and we're not isolating elements. So it's just been really cool to get to see this come together, and to see, like, to go through your outline and see, like, I recognize these elements because I've known you for so many years, and seeing them come together in one place and making them available for people in one place. I'm so excited for you, and I'm excited for everybody who's gonna, like, you know, who's in the program, who's gonna go through it and get to, like, really nail down, right, like, how to write a romance novel across all of the things that you need. Again, your brand, your internal, your external, how much you need to be able to write, so that you can work out what level of detail you need, and getting people really, you know, on their way to being a romance writer. I think I'm so excited. I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for them.
Yeah, you know what? I think I've ran from it for a long time. Not because I don't love it. Anybody that knows me knows that, like, people say, you're so passionate, because I love romance novels. Like, it's not a secret, okay? But I think it is it's a tall order, but I think it's a tall order, but the reality is there's not a lot of treatment over this particular genre for it to be one of the biggest fiction genres, which is also in and of itself makes me nervous. But when I found myself for the past few years saying the same thing over and over again, and in order to explain it with the resources, I have to say, okay, get some of this from here, and then get some of this from over there, and oh, how do you know that? Oh, well, that's because I've read a trillion books.
Yeah.
And when you look at this book on this and this is all what it, they'd be like, okay, wait, okay, which ones do I read? And so it becomes this where you sort of are just melting it all down and trying your absolute best to distill it down and be succinct, but at the same time make this into a resource that they can come back again and again and again. Because I still do that. Right? I still have my notes. This is why, if you were sitting at my desk, there's a pile of notes. I put them away only to pull them back out. Then I put them away and I put them back, and I'm just like, they just got to stay. Because sometimes I just need to look at my notes and center my thoughts and think about the characters. And I'm up for the challenge, realizing though it is a challenge. And so we are still, like, getting all the modules recorded and getting the resources. We'll have some automation aspects, which are going to be prompts that you can use for AI, and the workbook that we use from boot camp is going to be part of it. It's boot camp. That workbook is fire. I don't care what nobody say. They're lying to you. Not
except that everybody said it was an amazing workbook. So don't let that turn of phrase fool you. Everyone was obsessed with the workbook.
Yes. It's like, so, and I think the last part, well, not the last part, but I think the other part too was, like, it also has been a thing that distilling it down in this way helped me to refine things too. Right? Because sometimes when you are teaching things separately, well, in your brain, you know how to make it work, how to pull those elements together when you need them to work. But when you are presenting it as a whole, it must work as the whole noun. And so distilling it, probing, and at the same time, you know, things change and move. I mean, I know when I look at my resources, how I treat it when I'm doing a contemporary romance versus when I'm doing a romantic suspense versus when I'm doing an African American romance versus when I'm doing a PNR. But when I'm doing it this way, it's almost as if it needs to be succinct on its own, and then give resources to be able to support it for those other things. And so tall order. Tall order. And I have a feeling like that it'll be there and they'll get lifetime access and future updates, because I have a feeling the more I get feedback and I need to clarify things, that's the other great thing about it. Like, it's a living, breathing, so it can be updated. And even after creating like our mentorship, it still stands on its own. And then this still stands on its own. And that was another thing that was like, oh, how is that? And me having to answer that for myself. And now realize I'm like, it is, because it's just a different approach. And yeah. And so after working with people and answering the same questions, and people asking the same questions, and walking them through and trying to help them to notice the difference, especially when it comes to the flow of a love story, it's like, okay, I'm ready. Yeah. I'm ready.
Yeah, and there's no one better set for the task than you. So, it's a tall order, but you are the woman to fill it. So
come on, let's go.
So we just wrapped our very first month of the Academy. So we've had we did our kickoff call. We had our first module where we talked about ideating and brainstorming. And let me tell you, I sold my community on the mind map. The people are into the mind map, and I'm so glad, because I'm like, if you know how to use it, it can really, really, really help you, especially for my lovely, lovable, high-performing perfectionist overachievers who you get really locked up in your head, and you're like, oh, I gotta make, like you're just like sort of like staring at a blank screen, and you're like, I gotta make the magic happen. And it's like, okay, let's not stare at the blank screen and try to make magic happen. Let's get out our paper and pencil and just work with the information that we have in a tactile way to just get the ideas moving. It's almost like you're getting yourself physically engaged with the process. And again, I think especially for people like me who who will go from 0 to anxious real fast and, worry about everything being perfect and everything making sense, breaking out and getting into something that you are like, this is scratch paper, this is thinking space, all of a sudden the pressure just goes way, way down, because you're not like, nothing is codified, nothing is final. And it's also like, I think from a mental physiological perspective, you are actively working with whatever information you have and literally making connections, and it can really help engage you in the process and also keep you focused on thinking through whatever question it is that you're trying to answer, rather than, because sometimes if you're just thinking, your mind will kind of like wander, and then you kind of like be like, oh yeah, I was trying to think about this thing, or, versus getting yourself engaged on the page and on a physical piece of paper, and you are working out whatever it is that you were thinking, and you are drawing those connections. And let me tell you, the people are here for it. They love the mind map. And I'm like, yes, of course you do, because the mind map is good for your brain and it's good for your anxiety. So we have officially had that first one. So we've done, so we did our module on ideating and research, and how much research do you do before it's time to stop researching, which is very important. Working with the information you have, preparing yourself for outlining. And then we had our first trial by fire video where I just walked them through my own mind maps. It was like, all right, let me show you the pure chaos that I was working with. And let me just tell you what happened. And, I gave them my honest number of hours of like, hey, before I hit this breakthrough, this is how many hours I worked. So just so you know, all of this stuff that was like, yeah, I finally hit something, this is how many hours backed that, right? Because you got to know that, so that when your first mind map doesn't catch fire, that you're like, oh, well, I'm only 30 minutes in. So it's okay, That stuff takes time. You're going to build on it. So it's been really, really just amazing to get to, meet everyone who's going to be in this cohort. And we've done our weekly check-in, so they're sounding off the ideas that they're working with for the next 6 months, and just making sure that they're moving forward, everyone's doing okay, and then springboarding that into our Q&As. It's it's been a really satisfying, really great first month. And we have a lot more to go because it's 1 month out of 6, but I'm excited. It's been a great start, so I'm excited. It's got me really looking forward to diving in for the following 5 months for sure. So it's been crazy because we had launch, and then it was like, and the thing is going, and we're moving, and we're teaching, and you're writing. So I'm maybe a little overdue for a nap, but very happy, very excited. So it's been really good.
So then, like, they started sharing the types of stories that they want to write? And do you know what that sort of makeup is loosely?
So I'm still getting the, like, people's responses in. So people are still working a little bit and kind of, tying up, I think, their loose ends before they tell me what they're working with. But our basic spread, and this makes sense because because where my niche is, the basic spread, we have a lot of fantasy, and we've got at least a couple of mysteries, but so far, I think the entire spread is fantasy and mystery, which is, yeah, perfect, because they came to the right place. That's exactly what we're doing. So yes, so the I think it's more fantasy than mystery. So just from what I've seen so far.
I would be really curious. I mean, and if you don't have an answer, I totally understand. Like, what was the thing that had you the most concerned that you shouldn't have even been worried about when it comes to embarking on launching the Academy?
Okay, so this is sort of an answer to your question. It's sort of like something ultra specific. So this isn't something I was worried about when I launched, but I will tell you this was the funny thing that happened, semi recently. Was like, I made my slides for the first module, and I was like, oh my god, I don't know if is this even enough? Like, is there enough stuff on here? Is there, is it enough to get them where they're trying to go? Like, and it was like, I don't know, 20 slides or something. And I was like, is this going to be enough to fill, 45 minutes or something? And luckily because I was getting real nervous, and my husband was like, let me take a look at your slides. I will let you know if you're covering your bases. And I was like, okay. So I went for a short walk to just like calm myself down, take some deep breaths. And my husband looked through my slides, and I came back and he was like, Rachel, I'm so excited for like to sit in on this. Like, this is going to be so awesome. And lo and behold, so originally I had scheduled this whole thing takes an hour. So I'll teach for say 45 minutes. We do 15 minutes Q&A. I taught straight through an hour. And then we had to, had to do extra time on the end for Q&A. So I was like all worked up about like, is this even enough? And it was like, you taught clear through the 45 minutes. You blew past 45 straight into an hour. But also, I wanted it to be useful. I wanted it to be usable information that they could, because this is like such a weird stage in the writing process, right? Because you're like, there's not a lot concrete to work with, and you're trying to get to that point, and everybody's mind works a little bit differently. And so I was like, oh my God, like, I want people to be able to actually work with this. And people were immediately like, okay, I thought this was going to be kind of like woo woo, or like, just very like conceptual. But it was actually deeply practical, and everyone who was at the module was like, I am ready to work. Like, I know what I need to go do to work on the process. And that was the goal. And I was like, oh, yes, the people are like taking the information, and they're able to take it and go to their, their writing room or their office or whatever, and they know what steps they need to take to move their project forward. And that is like what we're always looking to do. And so it was like, oh, it was fine. It was all fine. I was so worried, but it was fine. So that was the big scare that I had. That was like, oh my God, I gotta teach. Is it enough? And it was fine. It was plenty.
Watching you go through the process of, y'all listen, first of all, if you don't know these two things about the differences between Rachel and I'm going to go ahead and point them out to you, okay? Number one, I talked about AI prompts. She talked about pulling out a piece of paper. That's the
yes,
first.
Ma'am. That is, you have just identified like each of our lanes. Look, if you are a pen and paper, old-fashioned kind of person, you come hang with me. If you're into AI, Dana is your girl. But it just established our lanes right there.
Okay. Now, y'all listen, I love a good piece of paper, but Rachel said, listen, y'all, even when we do this, listen, I write all over. I do. But when she said, I was like, if that ain't so that's number one, okay? Number two is I will talk about it today and it will probably be done tomorrow. Rachel, I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you brainstorm about it. Start gathering like a squirrel and start putting it all together. And so to now see it like with students in your own community and with your the teachings and the whatnots and the isms that I've watched you refine, even through just working through your workbook and just getting really clear, and even to the point of sitting down and brainstorming your business, like the direction. It's just
my 30th birthday.
Yes. Sitting on a couch in an Airbnb, okay?
Yes,
Listen.
where we were all freezing to death because it somehow weirdly didn't get warm enough ever in there.
So to see you now, like, I mean, you've had clients, but I think there's something different about the one-on-one experience versus the group experience. And I think it's going to be so fascinating to see what they do with this focused time and them committing to this focused time, and you writing. I mean, you always, but for you to commit to like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I had toggled heavily because I was just doing so much nonfiction that it's just like, all right, what I'm doing right now is nonfiction. Like, it just is where my, like, so doing all this nonfiction writing, and nonfiction is not my first love by any means. So, and I've done so much nonfiction, worked with nonfiction clients, written a bunch of, just like articles, teaching material, like that kind of thing. Coming back to fiction is like, oh my God, I'm just on a playground now. And I am just having the freaking time of my life. When I can't sleep and I wake up at 3 a.m., I'm working on that project. I'm getting in there and I'm just having a good old time. And then I really do feel like you. That's going to keep coming up over the next 3 weeks, but boy, does it make me feel like you when I'm up at 3 a.m. and I'm just like, this is so fun.
Girl, but like, I can't stand that late. I'm going to go back to sleep. I'm excited. I'm so excited. And I think even though you're like, oh my goodness, this through the summer, it's at the end of the year, I think it's going to be very interesting to see once you complete this experience, if it's something that you do again and again and again, or, I mean,
yeah, I can't wait to find out myself. Boy, it is all, and that's the interesting thing about a beta, right? Where it's like, that's what I'm looking to find out. I mean, we're trying the native streaming stuff inside of the platform, and I'm just reaching out to everybody, and I'm like, hey, do you like this quality? Do you like the interface? Does it suck? Like, is it super annoying to use? How much programming do you guys want? How much programming do you guys need? When do you need time to, like, okay, I need you to stop doing things, Rachel, that I feel like I need to show up to, because I gotta work. Like, I gotta I gotta sit down, I gotta do my stuff. Yes. Because more information is not always what you need. Sometimes, it's an easy pitfall for writers where, when we're nervous about the process, we just gather, we do more, we do more research and all that kind of thing. And sometimes it's like, I just need to sit down and do some work. And so, learning that as like, oh, that's the cool thing about, and it's the scary thing about being in a beta as well, is like, you just get really transparent and you're like, so did we like it? Did we not like it? And then you're just ready for the feedback, however it comes. And then you make adjustments, but you also get to do it as a community, which makes it special. It's something that you guys kind of build together. And so it has everybody's fingerprints on it, so that when you welcome in that new group, it's almost like you've made a space, and now it has a feel, and it has a little bit of like an established culture that you get to welcome people into now, that is a more formed thing that you get to kind of welcome people into. And that's the really cool thing about being, I think, in the beta of something, is getting to be a part of building it and having your fingerprints on it.
Yeah, and I think it also is the fact that you've done so much one-on-one work that even not fully knowing what's going to happen in a group environment still works because you've had to pivot so much in the
Yeah.
one-on-one environment. So the fact that you've done it so much, I think it helps you to be in the moment and get to experience it firsthand with them.
Yeah.
And then on the other end, say to yourself, okay, I liked this. This I would have done differently. I'd do this again. I wouldn't do that again. And until you sort of settle into something that just feels like just right.
Yeah. Which, that honestly, like, that's what writing is too, and
It is.
that's what we're gonna talk about. I don't remember which episode it is, but you talk about starting a new pen name and finding, like, trying something out, seeing how people like it, and also finding out, would I like to do this again, or was this is this kind of like a one-time thing, or what is it that I didn't enjoy about this, and how can I shift it, or how did the readers take these elements or whatever, and that is creative endeavors. It's like you have to do the thing, feel it out, try it, get a feel for what you like, what you don't like, what does and doesn't work for you, which also applies to like process stuff, right? That's why I think we love hearing about how different authors work, because when we're trying to figure out our own process, it kind of gives us stuff to try to say, I don't know, do I like this? Does this work for me? While we're working out our own way of doing creativity. And so that's what is both awesome and maddening about working in a creative field, is that you have to try stuff. You have to do it, and then you have to do it again, and then you have to do it some more. And it's super fun, but also like it means that you're shifting and you're learning and you're moving, you're kind of constantly like,
It's like a dance.
Yeah, nothing's ever just static and set, because
Yeah.
it's always evolving. And that's, again, it's awesome, and sometimes we're like, oh, I wish it would just be, one thing, but it's not, and that's what we signed up for. So it's cool to get to do that, and we talk about how things are going, and running a community and all this stuff, but this stuff just like it really seamlessly translates into creative life, because
It does.
a lot of stuff is like that. Business is like that. Creative life is like that. Family life is like that. Things are never as static and controlled as we want them to be.
I was just talking about this the other day. Our quilt. So I've been working on hand quilting, and I got this loom, and I got this huge quilt, and I'm putting this big quilt on this little bitty hoop, and it's like, how do the bear, like you watch all these YouTube videos, and I realize no one ever told you what do you do with all this extra fabric hanging. It's stuff like that. It's stuff like that you realize, like, you won't know until you do it. And you don't even know if it's right. All you want is that it works. And it may be that later on you realize, okay, I could have done those stitches better, or I could have used a different thread, but it's not until. And so I have all these tools. I lay them all out. And it's like, I got a million tools. I got 40 thimbles. And now I'm like, okay, this is the one I really like, right? And it wasn't until, because no one even tells you, how do I use the thing, right? Like and I think that's what makes it fun, though. It makes it fun. It makes it one of those things where you have to extend grace. And I think the great part about being a creative writer, and the more you give yourself permission to create new stories and to keep pressing play, is it helps you to see how much you've grown.
Yeah.
Right? Because the things that you needed to know in the beginning are not the things you need to know when you're on book 3 or book 4 or book 5. Or some of the questions you begin to ask about the nuances of building character when you're on book 7 is different than when you were on book 2.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's why it can be a lifetime pursuit, right?
Yeah.
Because you are, as long as you give yourself permission to, and you show up wholeheartedly, and you are ready, and you're ready to roll up your sleeves, it's like anything can happen.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So good. So this is a great opportunity to just dive in. So our book pick, again, is Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geissinger. And I want to, talk about some of the book generally, but probably before we do that, maybe we'll go for a summary, and then we'll kind of dive into how you found this book, what is this book, what the heck is a dark romance, This is because this is sort of, but not exactly. So yeah, let's have that summary, and then we'll get into all the good stuff.
Okay, so Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geissinger is a slow burn romantic suspense that blends dark romance elements with emotional depth. The story follows Truby Sullivan, a law student and waitress whose world shifts after she's rescued by Lim Black, a silent, dangerous man with ties to the underworld. What begins as a 28-day arrangement turns into an intimate, high-stakes exploration of trust, control, and desire. With a focused plot, tight POV, and emotional intensity, it's a compelling story in how to write romance with simmering tension and layered character arcs.
Excellent. Okay, so the first thing that that I would like to ask, so the summary says that it's a dark romance, but of course what we're going to talk about over the next several weeks is that it's like dark romance light. Like, it has some dark romance elements, but it never crosses some of those boundaries that make really make something a dark romance. So can you talk to me about what are the elements of a dark romance? What does something sort of need to be a dark romance so that we can position what dark romance is and then where this book kind of falls on that spectrum?
First of all, y'all, she's asking me this question. I'm going to tell y'all right now, I will not have a succinct definition. I did call on my boy Ash over at ChatGPT to help us get this right. But I will start off with saying it'll help if I tell how I got here. But I'm going to tell dark romance. We don't say that it's a dark romance. However, it is really close to it. And I do find that this is a great book if people think they might want to. But this doesn't cross all the way over into it. And we will, over the course of our discussion, talk about some of those moments where it doesn't go all the way. And that can be both a pro for someone who doesn't want to go into dark for real, but it can also be a con to people who, because they look at the cover and they read the description, think it's a dark romance, but it's not. And so I'm going to just read what I have. A dark romance is a subgenre of romance that explores love in morally gray, emotionally intense, and often high-stakes environments. These stories push the boundaries of traditional romance by placing characters in situations marked by danger, obsession, power imbalances, and emotional trauma, while still centering a love story that ends in some form of emotional resolution, often a hard one, happily ever after, or a happy for now. At its core, dark romance asks, what happens when love grows in the shadows between broken people and broken places under impossible circumstances? And so part of that summary is really going into like dark romance, usually not just in the shadows, but it usually has characters that are morally gray. You usually have an alpha main male character that is morally gray as far as how he operates in the world, whether he's in a professional capacity, organized crime. It becomes a part of, if you're reading a mafia romance, depending on what sort of subsection of romance that you're in. And you usually are dealing with things that may be traumatic, dubious consent, maybe some taboo. You can go everywhere from abductions, kidnapping, BDSM, when you get really, racy, and a little bit everything in between. One of the hallmarks of a dark romance to me is that you really do get to explore the sort of width and depth of love and some of the places that are usually not explored or sort of truly gone into in contemporary romance. And I know for a while we sort of had contemporary, and then for a while like emo romance or emotional romance, and then you sort of had this surgence of dark romance. And a lot of it, when people hear it, think mafia. That's probably one of the biggest ones, whether it's Italian or Bratva or even now Black Mafia. but you can even have some that, because of that morally gray aspect, maybe CEOs that deal on both sides of the line. You have a lot of that enemies to lovers, rivals, arranged marriages, contract marriages, forced marriages, kidnaps, abductions. You had people doing things like, what was that called? That was really popular for a while, where people fall in love with their captor.
You mean Stockholm Syndrome?
Yes, that was
that was a trope.
popular. It was a very popular trope for a while. Yes, and so a lot of times people are like, what? That turns into a romance? But I think also with those things that are feeling like, oh my gosh, the place of triggering things that are triggering, you also get the sort of you get the other spectrum of when it comes to the love and the relationships. They are like, I will do anything, including bullets, right?
Yeah.
Including blood on the hands, right? Like anybody, there's a trope like you touch her, you die. That is a trope. So that is a popular one, and you have obsession, possession, all of those things that in another day and time people wouldn't even talked about in romance.
Yeah.
But I think now it's one of those things that is probably one of the most probably up and coming and rising subsets of romance. And so when you talk about that, when we think about Beautifully Cruel, I think on the face of it, listen, it just reads like dark romance, just the look of it.
Tattooed forearm, adjusting a tie. You've got not a clean shaven man, but a dude with a beard going on.
Edge, right? And so here, one of the reasons, one of the ways that I found Beautifully Cruel, because this is my selection, and I'll tell y'all, I love it as a reader. As an editor and a writer, I know there are some things that could be better, but I love this story. I read it with almost every one of my clients that believe they want to write dark romance. I think it's a really great introduction into having a morally gray male character, especially for people who do not have a lot of experience with dark romance.
Yeah.
But it's really not dark romance, right? But kind of one of the things that you said, I can't remember if it was in our recording or one of our episodes, which is, if you read this and you can't take this, then you definitely, won't make it with the real deal. And so this is our Diet Coke of Cokes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it is, but it's not. And she does eat just enough to sort of have those elements on the periphery, the trauma of his upbringing, his life in the mafia, and this is probably one of the ways that you see it most, which is it comes from the main male character. I would say in mafia, you would tend to sometimes have it in both, because it's common for families to forge bonds through marriage, right?
I see.
So you may see it on both sides, but the majority comes from the male side. And so we have that here. You do have the main male character, Lem Black, who he's not fully what he seems, but he is exactly what he seems at the same time. And that is a hallmark. He is alpha, he does have the edge. But what JT Geissinger managed to do is really keep us near that via chatter more than being in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the major differences. It is, but it's adjacent. And so with that said, I found this because of looking for dark romances and being able to have conversations with clients that is what they want to do, and be able to make some of those decisions to once if they really want to write dark romance, or if they want to write stories with morally gray main male characters, or being able to touch and sort of have things like questionable business practices, or dealing with organized crime members. Maybe they work in banking or financing or law, and they choose to work with, dubious sort of entities and or men and women. or if they do in fact want to go and be able to explore those other areas. And so so having this sort of as like the gateway into, okay, do we do more? And usually after there, we read something that is like full blown, and then maybe find something in between and or begin having discussions about how they're similar, how they're different, and where do they want their stories to fall. I would say here in the context and scope of what we do at Story Deep Dive, this is also a great example of having something that could be adjacent to romantic suspense, but that is totally different than what we've had before. And it shows how there's such variety in romance, and how you can have the same sort of reader expectations and promises, but delivered in vastly different ways.
Yeah.
And this is one of those stories that allows you to sort of explore that, and I think it's a great one. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that you mentioned is that you probably would not use this as a comp. So you use this as a book for calibrating, right? And I love that because you're sort of like, okay, here is like our like entry. This is like the lightest kind of dark romance that you can have. And so if you, again, it's like if you don't like this, you're not gonna like the rest of it. So you've got this, and then you kind of look at one on the opposite side of the spectrum, and so you're kind of using it, you're sort of triangulating for the individual author what it is that they want to create. You had mentioned that you probably wouldn't use this as a comp for the most part, and I wondered if you talked a little bit about like what makes a comp a comp. Why wouldn't you necessarily say that this? What would you most likely not recommend this as a comp? Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because you are using it to calibrate, but you wouldn't recommend it as a comp. So I'd love to just kind of get the differentiators there.
Well, I would recommend it as a comp, but not as a comp for dark romance specifically, right?
Okay.
Gotcha. Right. And when we say comp, we say like a comparable read. In the Danger Tales world, we have what we call a triple threat, which is very specific books meant to, using your words, sort of triangulate where their book falls in the spectrum of the market and how they can begin to define the reader expectations that they want to deliver in their stories. Where you use comps can be, you can have a comp that helps you to understand what is what kind of tone you're going for. Mm-hmm. You can use a comp to help you to be able to get an understanding of what types of stakes and conflicts you want to explore in your stories. And so you may have comps for that to be able to explore. You may have comps to be able to explore what type of main male characters do I want? And what are some of the characteristics that I want them to have? And how do those characteristics show up on the page? Now, and I think this one would be really great for main male character comp. Mm-hmm. This one I think is a great a comp in general of like, if you want to understand what does it mean to have like a light mafia or a light dark romance. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anyone would ever say this is a light dark mafia, because I think that would be a little bit like a cop out. I think what they may say is maybe either dark elements or explain the elements that are there, or there may be some triggers. And I think people can use that. Yes, to notify people about triggers, but I think to sort of flag people that we will go there, but they may say not all the way there, that type of vibe. And so with that said, I define comps as being stories that are comparable. Sometimes you start at the basis of, if you were to go into a bookstore, what are some of the books that would be on the shelf with your book? Mm-hmm. And I find that sometimes that people can say, well, I just want to write romance. Well, there's a big difference between writing Lucy Score and J.T. Geissinger.
Oh, man. Yeah. Like that is a whole spectrum, and a lot of stuff happens in between. JT forget about like JT Geisinger's light dark romance and someone who's like dark romance, and then Lucy Score over here with her rom-coms. It's like, and then so much stuff happens in between those places. We're gonna need to get more specific, and your readers are going to want you to be more specific, because your romance readers, they know what they want, they know what they like. You need to let them know if you are delivering that good. Right.
And you should know, and sometimes you don't know until you begin this process of saying, okay, and actually I'm gonna pause for a second. Give yourself time to do this. People think I'm going to pick one book, I'm going to read one book, I'm going to read 3 books. 3 books? What? Do you know how many books that you really need to be able to read to be able to truly put your finger on it? And once you find that, you can explore others, because then you can cherry pick elements, right, that you really want to learn. Because there's some people that just, if you want to do found family, or you want to do a community where your environment is another character, yeah, pick up a Lucy Score, even if you're not doing a rom-com. Why? Because you're just learning by proximity and inspiration. Yes. But if you're still trying to pinpoint that I want to have a morally gray alpha male character, a female main character that's down on her luck, that's smart, that is resourceful, but that just has had a hard time, almost like a quasi Cinderella sort of, retelling, not only the retelling, but how the story sort of pans out. You can begin to pinpoint what those stories are. And so having comps are a way for you to see, how do those elements play out on the page?
Yep.
What are some of the choices that author makes? How are they able to, like a basketball game, have a team set up to get that layup? You know what I mean? And to be able to deliver. And what are those things that the readers are wanting when they are going into those environments, and how are they responding to that? And as you begin to read different comps, what you're slowly starting to do is saying, wow, I absolutely love having laugh out loud moments like this. And I really like having a main male character that has depth and that has layers that are slowly evolving like this. Right. And then once you start doing that, you can almost, I love thinking about like a funnel. And I know sometimes in business, we think about funnels as in a sales funnel, but I think about it in everything that we do. We have this wide mouth where we sort of drop in a bunch of books. You drop in the movies that have inspired you. Like, you never get away from the things that are your favorite. Like, if I could write a Beauty and the Beast for every single book, I would write a Beauty and the Beast every single book. Every man would be a beast, okay? Listen, is she tired of it? Heck to the no, I'm not tired of it. And here's another one. But then what starts happening is you sort of have that cone that goes down. And if you're not watching and you're listening, just think of that funnel. And then all of a sudden it gets very, very narrow. And that narrow channel is when you are in your pocket, in your zone, and then you spill out on the other end, and it becomes your body of work. That's this overflow. And you will start seeing like the essence of the people and the types of stories and the things that you are inspired by, but it will become wholly your experience, because it's how you see it and how you tell it and what means the most to you. So when you are looking at this, I think at the end of the day, J.T. Geisinger's sort of foundation is very much at play here. She likes very strong female main characters. They are usually very competent. They do have, almost all of them are on some sort of hard time, but it's not like some of the other stories where they need the main male character's money. Now, they usually do have the billionaire-esque, like mini romances sort of vibe. They are very well off and established, but that's not why she's there. And that is common for her. Now, she does have a lot more wiggle room around the dynamics and the stakes and the conflicts that she likes to explore. But her core of how the protectiveness of her alpha man, what he's willing to do for her, usually very good banter, laughs, is common across her brand. And so those things are there, but you find those for yourself, and then you begin to get comps to fill in the gaps, and then to begin to have examples, and to ask yourself as a writer the tough questions of, okay, I like this element. What does that look like in my world? And when I see story, and what if I take this and turn this on its head? And, I think turning it on its head is a good idea, but make sure you're doing it with some research and backing behind it. Yeah. But the point about this is that's where comps come in. And and I think this one is good in that respect of like, if you want to do light, if you don't want to you don't want to touch on some of those other aspects, I would say I'd rather you just don't touch on those aspects and maybe do romance and versus just saying I'm doing mafia light, maybe. And that's kind of in reality with JC guys. I don't think she ever says it's mafia. He just so happens to be in the mafia. Yeah. And so, I think I answered the question and then some.
Yeah. Well, and I want to take a second and, because you're talking about comps in, like specific to romance, because that's what we're talking about here. But as a reminder for either if you're new here or just if it's, if it wasn't apparent, comps are for everybody. Exactly. Everybody needs your comps. All of my, if you're new to the podcast, you don't know me, I work in fantasy and crime. So, and all of my clients, we do comps, whether you are going indie or you want, you need them if you want to pitch trad, because usually they want those, to understand how to position your book and how you are positioning your book. But even if you're not pitching traditional, if you are publishing indie, like you want those comps because they do help you orient your story and what you are trying to accomplish. So for my fantasy writers, we're looking at what kinds of plots are you working with? Are we in a rebellion plot? Are we in sort of more of an adventure story? Is it a crime at the core? We look at, we might grab comps for types of magic systems, whether you're doing a soft or a hard magic system, right? But we're using those to orient, let alone style, tone, that kind of thing. Same thing with my crime writers. If you are writing a crime story that is a police procedural, we are going to pick up a bunch of police procedurals and read a whole bunch of them to make sure that you are hitting the elements of what goes in a police procedural, which means we're dealing with, the law and, when getting evidence that we know will hold up in trial, and what kinds of limitations you're under, versus if you're a journalist, right? Your crime story featuring a journalist protagonist, your protagonist has different problems that they run into because they're in a different they're positioned differently to the crime. And so we do those, and we might also look at specific protagonists, if we're aiming for something that's more of a conspiracy versus something that's more like murder mystery. The point being that comps are for everybody. You are always using other books to help you understand the kind of story you're trying to tell, and to position for yourself and find what you like, what you want to do, what you want to see more of. Those are you're collecting all of that information, and because we were talking about specific to romance, we're all doing comps. We all need comps. Comps are comps are for everybody. So I just wanted to make sure to clarify that in the context of this conversation.
Well, yeah, I would say that. Well, yes, totally agree. What I absolutely love too in that example, and what I said, is the fact that you may find that there are several. There's not going to be one. Why? Because there's no one that's going to write a story the way that you tell a story. Yeah. So there may be several that begins to help you to layer your understanding, because we have so many elements that we're working at one time to tell one story, and that's where those comps come in. You may find that you like these 2 to 3 as your sort of cornerstone that really helps for you to be able to identify, but those others help you to begin to round out. And you may even find, just like what Rachel was saying, that looking at the different nuances, looking at the protagonist, the type of crime, the way it unfolds, maybe the environment, maybe that whether it's contemporary or in a fantasy environment, all of those elements. And then you may have a whole nother set because you're doing a different type of series. Maybe you're doing a trilogy this time instead of standalone books. And so I think one of the things, I always tell my students that the moment that you understand picking comps and understanding your triple threat, you have access to the best mentors in the world, and now we have it in our pocket, right? You have a phone and you can get on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Kobo or whatever, and then being able to understand partly what we do here at Story Deep Dive, working with your coach or your editor, to be able to really get into understanding like what are those differences and what do those differences mean to me. And I think this is one of those stories that can really spark that type of a conversation because it is an easy read. The plot is not complicated, right? It is complex characters, easy plot. And you really can talk your way through it and begin to understand, oh, what do I want on the page or off? Those are the kind of decisions. Do I want taboo sex or not? Do I want it super steamy and graphic or not? Do I want my love scenes to be sensual or explicit and graphic or not? Right? And once you begin to make those sort of decisions, I think it makes it easier for some to move towards the page. And sometimes for others, it's like, because then you are comparing yourself, and that's not the point, right?
Yeah.
It's not for a comparison. And in some ways you will compare, but not as in your rating you must be like Lucy scored, right?
Yeah.
You must be like Beverly Jenkins. No, never, in my dreams. But instead beginning to sit down and work alongside someone that you absolutely love their work and that inspires you to be a better writer and helps you to see how you can interpret the stories that are inside you to tell.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? It's comparison for reference material, but like you're looking for like work to inspire your work. And that's always the bend that we want to take, is drawing inspiration from, not, never showing up to a book and being like, oh no, like she did this, I'm never going to be able to do that. You are at the start of a spiral, walk yourself right back. You hear those thoughts go through your head, you walk yourself back, you take a nap, you get some food, you make sure you drink your water, and then maybe get out in the sun. Like, as in, right, you just take a second and you walk yourself back away from those thoughts and come back to it fresh of, this is what's possible in storytelling. And letting that fuel you to say, like, what do I want my stories to do? And to let it get you curious and get you excited to tell whatever the story is that you're trying to tell. And again, you're using these other stories to help you find your story. No one's asking you to be anybody except yourself, and to keep getting better as yourself as a creative. And that's what we're doing with reading, with comps. This is fuel for our creativity. This is reference material to help us get better. That is how we sort of entreat our comps and our reading. So, and I will say, because you made a statement about like, what kind of steaminess do I want? Do I want it to be explicit, or do I want it to be more sensual? And I think it's worth mentioning, this book, I would say, is quite a bit steamier than the things we never got over. So like, just to like calibrate people who are, showing up to this and maybe they haven't read the whole thing, or they're listening to this episode to find out if they will, you should just know this book, like, I thought Lucy's score was steamy, and then all of a sudden I read this book.
No,
and I was like,
girl, not Lucy, not
like,
compared.
what is? Hello?
And you usually will have right in darker romance. It is a little bit more explicit. It may be more taboo. It may push the boundaries more.
Yeah.
But I will say, at the end of the day, dark romance is still romance, right? And that's the other part of it. It still is romance.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and therefore the same air quote rules apply, right?
Yeah.
It's just the players are different. And again, it goes back to the fact that you have that, the wider scale, the depth of the scale, but it is still, at the end of the day, romance.
Yeah, and I think, knowing that, again, going into dark romance, if you're looking to write dark romance, or, when we read a dark romance or a romance like this, keeping in mind that this is still a romance, and so we are looking at creating a fantasy and understanding, we'll talk about this in the coming episodes, understanding what that fantasy is, so that you can anchor your understanding in what's driving like what's driving whatever this story is. What is that operating desire that is underneath our Armani suits, billionaire, hot guy, like, all of that stuff. And so I think it's so helpful to keep that in mind, is particularly if you're not a romance reader and you show up to a romance and kind of having that understanding, so that you're judging it on honestly on the basis of the genre that it's in, on the basis of what it is trying to do. And I think that can be really helpful when you're approaching books that are outside of your genre, whether whether that's romance or whether you're reading a racial crime novel and you're like, this is not usually my thing, I don't really the whistleblower over here, but understanding what does this genre set out to do, or what does this book set out to do, what is the goal, and does it achieve that goal, whether or not it's to my taste, right? And that can help you frame when you're showing up to books that are not your usual kind of book, to help you frame it so that you can pull something from it and still learn from it, even if it's just not your particular taste.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times too is listen, I think everybody can get something from this book, but in general, I even will say going into it and just letting the experience be what it is, and knowing that there is a deposit that's being made.
Yeah.
Right. There's a deposit that's being made into your creativity, and you don't know it until you start working on your next story, or a story 2 years from now. And you think, I remember one time when, especially when you have a good, like, ping-ponging moment, brainstorming session, that it just, a lot of times that's even better, where it's not about any one story or one genre. It's just about your story and different delivery methods that you've encountered, and how can you mix and match and piece and just have fun, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those that you get to experience really close to that without it getting close. It's like you get the warmth without touching the fire. Right? I think it's maybe a couple of moments where it's like, okay. But it's not a lot. So it's a great one. It's a great one.
Is there anything else? Because in kind of wrapped up in this conversation, particularly about comps, we really kind of touched on the things that we're going to be talking about in plot and characters. We talk about sort of this light-ish dark romance, who should be, kind of picking up this book as a potential comp. And we even talk about, sort of morally gray, strong female lead. So these are all things that we're going to cover in more detail throughout the episode. Is there anything else on your list that you want to kind of just give people a heads up on, or mention for context for this story before we wrap for the day, to get us ready for our next 3 weeks with this book?
I think one of the things that we didn't mention that is in this story is the fact that there's a limited POV. You will tend to find that in most romance that it is a dual protagonist genre. And so I would say for categorical fiction, like, it's usually dual, almost 50-50, right? This book is not that. Yeah. And we will talk about that, but I think I say in the other episode, as well as I'll say here, I think that's one of the things that this story does well. And I think that's how she's able to limit some of the things that will normally pull this over into a full-blown dark romance. And I think it was a strategic choice, and we talk a little bit about that too. So that's another one of those areas that's not common, right? Because in romance, you do have two protagonists, so they both are on a journey. Yes, they're on a journey together, but they're on their own journeys too. And that is one of the things that makes romance a different genre. Yeah. And so that is one of the other things. So just being aware of that. There are some times where you will wish that you had more limb. I know I did, but I think she did a good job overall, but it did have some other consequences that we'll talk about in the episodes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Awesome. Okay. Well, Y'all, that is your introduction to Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geissinger. So next week we're going to be talking about the plot, and we will give you the whole skinny on, the effect of the limited POV and setups for the story and how those pay off, or what the expectations that are set. So we're going to get real, and of course, again, as with every book, we don't even scratch the surface of all the things we could talk about with this book, but boy, do we spend a few good hours digging into as much as we can. So you have a lot to look forward to. So with that said, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a comment. Let us know if you've read this book. I don't think I said subscribe. There's so many things that a person can do to interact with this podcast. I try to remember them all, but make sure you subscribe so you always know when the new episodes are coming out. But other than that, we will be back next week. We'll talk some plot. We'll talk Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geissinger. We look forward to seeing you then. And until then, happy writing.